Hi everyone, I'm Hannah Pauley and I'm going to talk to you about the informed consent document I found online. I found it from the West Texas Counseling and Guidance Organization and I thought it was very thorough. It goes right along with the ACA Code of Ethics as well as the Ohio laws and regulations. The very first thing the form mentions is that counselors are not to impose their beliefs onto their clients, which is reflected by the Code of Ethics, Ohio's laws, and all of the readings that we've read in class and outside of class. So I enjoyed that it was the very first thing they mentioned. They go on to define a counselor, which I believe defining a counselor in this document is very essential as it tells the client what exactly the professional identity of the counselor is, and that helps them understand what are you doing. So the form mentions the counselor is obligated to discuss various aspects to counseling, which include the nature and method of treatment, its extent, evaluation practices, additional rules and boundaries within the professional relationship. This is echoed by the ACA Code of Ethics, that counselors have an obligation to review in writing and verbally with their clients the rights and responsibilities that they have within their professional relationship. I also read parts of a book called Counseling Skills, A Practical Guide for Counselors and Helping Professions, written by John and Jillian McLeod in 2011. They also mention this obligation of counselors to ensure a client is sufficiently informed of what is offered and what may occur during a session. The form goes on to address the professional relationship in more detail. It states that a therapist cannot have any other type of relationship. So I'm talking about dual relationships between clients and counselors. A counselor is not in a position to be a friend or a social, personal relationship with that client. And the form very well describes that. John and Julia's book, as I stated before, on page 113, says that dual relationships mostly occur in rural communities when everyone knows each other, or a self-contained subculture where people normally choose a counselor that shares similar beliefs, lifestyles, and values as they do. So there's a little less objectivity in that. They also state that counselors must be in the interest of the client. If there is a relationship outside of just the professional one, then the counselor may be tempted to make responses and decisions based on their personal needs and wants rather than just the client. The ACA defines a counselor's professional relationship to a client, and it doesn't state that they can be friends or personally involved as well. So everyone pretty much agrees on this. Also, the Ohio rules and laws states that dual relationships with a client or former client may include sexual abuse, misconduct, exploitation of the client or former client, except as permitted by law, violates client confidentiality, which segues us into our next topic about confidentiality. The form addresses consent to confidentiality of the client and what standards the counselor is held to in order to keep such confidentiality. The form itself listed bullet points of what is permitted, who is permitted to hear such information that may be considered private. And I really liked that because as a client, I can see that as being very helpful to have a bullet point of who could possibly hear this should circumstances go that way. Some of those people include healthcare providers, staff involved in treatment, federal, state, or local law officials with legal access to treatment programs, etc., etc. Ohio law states various items as well that are considered confidential, such as social security numbers, criminal background checks, transcripts, along with that. And the ACA states in Section B, counselors must communicate the parameters of confidentiality and privacy to clients, as well as situations where confidentiality may be breached. In that book I mentioned earlier, written by John and Julia McLeod, page 111 mentions how confidentiality is associated with the client's understanding of such and how the counselor explains it. So if a client is fully informed regarding the limits of confidentiality, then they are in a position to decide what they can and cannot share. And that is, up to the client. So I like that kind of takes the responsibility off of me and lets them share what they feel they need to share, given all that I've told them. The Ohio laws, ACA Code of Ethics, the outside source book that I mentioned, and the form itself all agree on the standards of practice. The form is very thorough, as I said before. I admire how in-depth the writers went to ensure that all the information is carefully exhibited and given to clients. So I hope to mirror such efficiency in my future practice. And I was just going to show the no-show and cancellation policy. They have a whole paper dedicated to this, which I love. So that just kind of tells a little more about the payments that I also read about. They mention late fees in the document. If you don't give 24-hour notice, then it's a $25 fee, and until you pay that fee, you are not allowed to have any more sessions. So they're very strict about that. The ACA mentions just that we are allowed to receive payment, and we have to clearly go over how the billing procedures work, late fees, anything like that. The Ohio laws and rules also mention that. It is important to go over that with the client so that they know what to expect whenever you're sending them a bill and they're like, why? So I liked how everything was just thorough, and there really wasn't a lot of differences among all three, which is interesting to me, given that each state has their own laws, and this is Texas. So that's good. We're heading in the right direction. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll reply to y'all soon. Thanks.